Hey there guys, welcome back to Craig's Horror. Today I am going to be taking a look at the shadowy depths of disappointment. Now I'm going to be exploring the horror movies of 2024 that left me more yawning rather than screaming. I mean, don't get me wrong, 2024 was a fantastic year for horror films, but it did come with a few disappointments. So get yourselves comfy and let's jump straight in. The first movie on my list today is Sting, a giant spider movie, and I was actually really hoping that this was going to, really creep me out because I do actually have a fear of spiders, but unfortunately it didn't. Sting had all the potential for a gripping creature feature, but instead of a unique, engaging plot, we were served with a cliche-ridden narrative that we have seen quite a few hundred times before. What truly pulls you into a horror movie is how much you care about the characters. It's very, very important. Unfortunately, this movie fell flat in this department. I mean, the characters, most of them were one-dimensional and quite forgettable. I can't really remember hardly any of them. I mean, from memory, there was this one extravagant character who was probably the only real entertaining character in the movie, but other than that, something was just missing. Horror movies also need to thrive on building suspense and delivering scares. However, this was just severely lacking in both areas. The pacing was off. It was, it had these very long, boring stretches that just did absolutely nothing to build the tension. The jump scares were predictable and poorly executed, and something that probably didn't help with this was the trailer. Pretty much every single jump scare that happens in the movie is shown in the trailer, and that is just one bad move. In conclusion, in my opinion, Sting was a major letdown. It had all of the ingredients for a classic spider creature feature, but it did massively fail to deliver on almost every front. The second movie on my list is The Front Room, which I only did a review on a couple of weeks ago on this channel. Now, the premise of this movie was intriguing, but the execution was lackluster. The narrative promised a tense domestic horror, exploring the psychological turmoil of a pregnant woman dealing with her batshit crazy mother-in-law. Instead, what we got was a muddled plot with too many loose ends. The storyline, it sort of like meandered without any clear direction, making it hard to pretty much stay invested. It dragged quite a lot in the middle with scenes that added little to the overall story or tension. By the time the plot picked up again, any initial interest had pretty much gone for me anyway. The slow burn approach can be effective in horror if it's done right, but in this movie it felt more like a slog. For a movie that hinges on the interpersonal drama between Belinda and her crazy mother-in-law, the characters were surprisingly underdeveloped. Belinda's motives and emotions were barely explored, and her mother-in-law was reduced to this sort of one-dimensional antagonist who spent most of the time in this movie shitting herself and then rubbing her shit all over the house. I honestly did not find those parts entertaining by any slightest. The movie just fell short in almost every aspect, from weak plot execution and underdeveloped characters to a massive lack of scares and inconsistent tone. It was just a massive disappointment for me. Now, movie number 3 on my list today actually might shock a few people in the world of horror, but it's Daddy's Head, and it was a massive letdown for me. I think the issue with this one is that there were so many people over on social media saying that this was the scariest movie of 2024 for them, so I instantly wanted to watch it, but as I said, massively disappointed. The premise of Daddy's Head had the potential to be a deeply unsettling psychological horror. A boy and his stepmother haunted by this eerie creature resembling his deceased father. Basically, it's actually quite a good concept for, ripe tension, and, there's a lot of emotional depth in there. However, the movie, it just squandered this potential by failing to develop or coherent and compelling storylines. I mean, key plot points were introduced, but it was never really fully explored or resolved, leaving me feeling with a sense of incompletion. For instance, the backstory of the deceased father, it was only superficially touched upon, providing little context for his spectral return. Now, the boy in this film, who should have been the emotional core of the storyline, he was portrayed in a way that made it difficult for me anyway, to empathize with his plight. I mean, his reactions to the supernatural events were often muted and pretty much unconvincing. And when he did lose his temper or his mind for whatever reason, he takes it out on his stepmother. And I think, if I remember correctly, at one point, he even punches or maybe slaps her really, really hard in the face and she goes flying back. And I mean, once again, this is not going to gain sympathy for this little boy character. I mean, no. The daddy head creature, which should have been a source of relentless fear, it was actually depicted in a way that was more comical than terrifying. I think the only moment that I found the whole creature was, it was creepy when he was in the bedroom scene, when, the part where they keep the creature slightly in the dark so you can't truly see this daddy's head thing, but you can definitely hear it. Now, I feel that if they'd stuck with that formula, this movie might have been better for me. But once we do get to see the creature out of sight of the shadows, it's a total letdown. And it's just a massive shame because it did have the ingredients for a chilling horror film, but it just fell short and it just didn't deliver the horror experience that I was hoping for, that was being broadcasted all over the internet. Okay, film number 4 now is The Deliverance. I will be honest with you, I wasn't massively excited to see this movie. I did really take my time before going in and watching it. I mean, what I mean by that is it wasn't high up on my list of movies to watch first, However, I do always keep an open mind going into any movie. However, this one did fall flat, mainly from the second half of the film onwards. This movie did kind of set the stage for this gripping supernatural horror film, but the execution was very underwhelming. The plot was riddled with inconsistencies and unanswered questions. It felt as though the film was trying to juggle way too many ideas without fully developing some of them. The first half of the film, brilliant character development. The cinematography was looking very sexy as well, but the second half just became ridiculous. It really lets the whole movie down. In the final showdown scene, I was honestly wanting the film to just hurry up and end. I was bored. The supernatural antagonist in this film, which, should have been the main source of the terror, was also very underwhelming. The film failed to provide a clear and compelling backstory for this weird, crazy entity, making its motivations and its actions slightly confusing. The whole exorcism thing has been done to death in the cinema, but what they did with this movie is they just ended up changing the name from Exorcism to Deliverance. But whichever way you look at it, that final battle was just another over-the-top exorcism battle. I was yawning. And the final movie on my list today is Night Swim, a film that really disappointed me because it had a ton of potential. It had this fantastic opening kill scene, but that's about it. The film sets the stage with a compelling premise: a former athlete grappling with a degenerative illness, moving into a new home for a nice new fresh start with his family, only to encounter a malevolent force tied to the outsides, or the outside swimming pool. However, the film's execution of this intriguing setup was severely lacking. One of the biggest issues with Night Swim was the lack of character development. We, the audience, we need to connect with the characters and actually care about them. But unfortunately, Night Swim is another one of those films, in 2024 that failed epically. You got the main protagonist, Ray. Now, he should have been the emotional core of this whole story. I mean, as I said, he's a former baseball player forced into early retirement by a degenerative illness. His struggle and vulnerability should have been compelling. However, the film didn't didn't delve deeply enough into his character. His illness was mentioned, don't get me wrong, but it's never fully explored, and his transition from athlete to struggling father was very poorly handled. I found him boring, if I'm honest with you. Ray's reactions to the supernatural events were often muted and unconvincing, making it difficult for the audience to sort of like empathize with him, I suppose. I mean, there were moments that really dragged on in between certain scenes, you know, throughout the whole movie, and it just felt very unnecessary. They could have literally cut out some of these dead scenes and the movie could have been shorter. The CGI scenes during the final battle just had me holding, you know, my head into my hands because I just hate CGI in horror. When will they ever learn? But in conclusion, Night Swim, we know it was a massive, significant letdown. Despite its promising premise and potential, the film just failed to deliver on almost every what am I on about? It did, you know, undeliver for me. From unfulfilled plot promises and underdeveloped characters to predictable scares, or should I say the lack of scares, the pacing issues, the inconsistent tone, the lackluster cinematography, and forgettable soundtrack. It just didn't provide the horror experience that I was hoping for, you know, pretty much the same experience with any horror film that I delve into. This movie was just a massive no for me, and for me, this was the worst of the worst horror movies of 2024. Okay then guys, that is my 5 disappointing horror movies of 2024. What about you guys? Which horror movies from 2024 disappointed you? And do you agree with the ones that have featured on my list today? Let me know everything in the comments box below. And on that note guys, that is a wrap. Thank you all for stopping by and watching today. Make sure you smash that subscribe button, stay safe out there, and I will see you all again very soon.